Hey, welcome to Youth. We are in our one-off series on arguing, and really excited to dive into this one. Not because I love arguing, but because I think it's a really important conversation. Did you know that almost an hour a day is spent arguing within families? Research shows that we average around 6 arguments a day with our family members, and that's an average of 42 arguments per week, which is crazy because it doesn't stop there. We argue about 180 times with our families a month. That's over 2,000 arguments a year. Talk about a lot of arguing. If you're anything like me, you've probably seen this all over, arguing all over social media right now. You've probably seen arguing some in your family being all shut up and in quarantine. Maybe has even caused some of those statistics to skyrocket. And honestly, for me, I get wrapped up in a bunch of conversations and arguments that I don't even want to be in, but they're just happening so often around me that I find myself in the middle of them. People argue over anything and everything, right? Sports, politics, especially in this moment right now, a lot of that going on. Family things, friendship, drama, maybe some lesser crazy things like what's the best Billie Eilish song, or is Taylor Swift's new album actually great or not? Or who is the greatest basketball player of all time? You might feel like you spend a lot of your time in conversations just arguing with people. Seriously, stop and think about the last argument you got into or witnessed with someone else. Was it this week? This morning? Was it 5 minutes ago? What was it about? Something really big and important, or something seemingly pointless? Either way, I know how you feel, because honestly, I've been there many times in my life. I was thinking about an argument that I had early on in my dating relationship with Danica. It was when we were in college, and we were like, I guess by early on, we were probably a year and a half in. We dated for 3 years, so we started having this conversation. Okay, looks like things are getting pretty serious. We need to really buckle down. And by the way, what's going to happen when we get married? Because we go to 2 separate churches. What church are we going to go to? We can't continue to go to 2 separate churches. And I remember having a lot of conversations, a lot of tears over the conversations, because it was like, I love my church. I feel that God's calling me there. I was working at a church, and Danica loved her church, and she felt like God was calling her there. And she actually worked at her church too, doing like her dream job, which was doing preschool ministry there. And so we spent a lot of months weighing that out, trying to figure out what we were going to do eventually when we got married. And what we ended up landing on is that Danica was going to continue to go to her church until we got married, and then she would make the transition to my church. She started serving in our youth ministry before she ever fully transitioned into the church, and God worked it all out. You might be wondering, why am I telling you this? Well, one reason I'm telling you this is because one thing that this story illustrates is that we weren't doing anything wrong. We just felt very strongly about each of our positions. She was hoping that maybe I could go to her church. I was hoping that maybe she could go to my church. And honestly, we were just plugged into the ministry that God had for us. Nothing more beautiful than that, right? Except for when it causes conflict. And whether we realize it or not, whether we like it or not, arguments happen all the time, especially with people that we care about. They happen with all kinds of different people over all kinds of different things. Honestly, it's a harsh reality, but it's probably going to be this way for the rest of your life. There's going to be things that you bump into that you disagree with. All you have to do is glance at social media, and you see people arguing all over, right? In the comment section, there's like even something that shouldn't even be a debate. You look in the comment section, and people have figured out a way to make it a debate. There's politics and religion, and all of that is going to cause arguments. And I think most of us probably feel like arguments are bad. I mean, conflicts usually don't make us feel great. and they can be really difficult and super uncomfortable to have. No one feels more uncomfortable in an argument than I do. Conflict is like my least favorite thing in the world. And I think many of us try to avoid arguing with everything that we can, right? We may have strong opinions about things, but we don't argue because we want to fit in and not stand out. We don't want to offend anyone or make anyone upset. But here's the thing. Not all arguments are bad. And arguing can actually be a good thing, but only if it's done in a way that's helpful and respectful. That's why I think it's an important subject to talk about, because if we don't learn how to argue in a healthy way, then the quality of our relationships, our friendships, our family, with our relationships with our family, our teammates, and even the people in your small group, could be on the line. Those relationships are going to maybe require sometimes some healthy conflict. You see, conflict is a part of life. And the reason that it's a part of life is because relationships are a part of life. Whether it's a friend, a classmate, a parent, a sibling, a coach, one day maybe your girlfriend or boyfriend, someone on social media, at some point you're going to get into conflict and you're going to argue. And that can be really challenging for a lot of reasons. For starters, this is one of the biggest reasons, feelings are typically involved. I don't know if you guys know this or have realized this. I'm sure you have, though. People usually don't fight about something that they could care less about. No one's like, I think I'll just have an argument over something I don't even care about. Think about it. When you fight with your parents over your grades, it's because your parents care about your grades. When you fight with your best friend about the lie that they told you, it's because you care that your friends are honest with you. When you see adults fighting about things like who should be the next president, it's because they care about choosing the best person for the job. A lot of times we're simply arguing because we care a lot about what we're arguing about. Or we care about who we're arguing with. A lot of times those are the two really strong reasons for an argument. You either care a lot about the topic or you care a lot about the person, and it's worth entering into that conversation. You don't want to see a friend make a terrible choice. You don't want to see an older sibling talk to you in that way. So you argue, not because you want to, but because you care so much about that person. In those cases, your feelings are an even bigger deal, because as it most often happens in arguments, our feelings get hurt. Someone says something harsh or rude or deeply hurtful in a heated argument, and those things are hard to come back from, right? You're in a conversation, and because you care so much about the person, you didn't even want to have the conversation anyway, but then you do, and you get like this pushback from them, and that can really hurt sometimes. So what do we do? Well, then sometimes what we do is we avoid the person altogether, right? Maybe you've heard this term. This is kind of like cancel culture, where it's like, I had this argument with this person, and well, I'm done with them, right? You unfriend them, you block them, and you don't talk to them anymore. We ghost them, we completely disappear, and we hope that eventually the hurt feelings or reasons that we argued, like these feelings within us, will disappear as well. Or maybe we do talk about it, just not to them. Instead of talking to the person we've argued with, we talk to everybody else about it. But that really doesn't get us closer to solving the issue, does it? I think one of the biggest reasons arguments can be challenging to navigate is this. The other person thinks differently than we do. Maybe you fought with a friend or thought about and you thought using certain words was okay. You 100% believed. Maybe your friend said something and they thought that what they said was 100% okay, but you know that those words were hurtful. Or maybe you fought with a teammate because they had a totally different strategy on how to win the game. Maybe you've seen people argue in the comments section on Instagram because they had totally opposite views from each other. Regardless of who's arguing, usually this is kind of how it goes down. Instead of listening to what someone else has to say, we jump right into the argument. Why? Because we honestly can't understand how they could possibly think different than we do. Are they crazy? Are they maniacs? How could they possibly believe this? So, What do? We spend our energy trying to convince them that we're right and that they've lost their minds. After all, isn't that the whole point of the argument? To prove your point, to get the other person to see your side, for them to see how wrong they are, to win an argument and to be right? See, I think the biggest problem we have when it comes to navigating arguments is that we feel like there has to be a winner and a loser. I don't know about you, but I definitely don't like to lose. That's the mindset a lot of us have when it comes to arguments. We want to win, we want to be right, and it doesn't matter what we have to say or do to make sure that at the end of it, we come out on top. We come out of the argument feeling like, I had some really good points, I really backed them into a corner here, they had no idea what was going on, and now I'm a boss. But if that's the problem that's holding us back, what if we shifted how we thought about it? What if winning the argument wasn't really about winning at all? What if it wasn't about being the one who's right? Remember what we said. Conflict happens. No matter how hard we try to avoid it or distance ourselves from it, at some point we're going to find ourselves arguing with someone or being argued with. Sometimes you don't even have to go looking for an argument. It finds you. Because that's the case, I think it's important that we learn a better way to handle it, a way that allows for us to aim for more than just being right. Today we're looking at the book of James. This was written by Jesus' half-brother. It was written to a group of Christians in the early church, and James offers some wisdom that is going to be an absolute game changer for you and I when it comes to how to handle conflict. Here it is. James 1:19 says this, "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." Notice the word James uses here, everyone. So basically, James comes out of the gate saying, what I'm about to tell you is for everybody, not just the people I agree with, not just the people who think they're right, or the people who have the biggest tempers, or with the most passionate voices. This is for all of us. James wrote this letter to people who are following Jesus, and I think that makes this introduction even more powerful. The message is for everyone, but it's especially important for those who are in Christ. As followers of Jesus, this is how we're supposed to communicate with other people. This is how we're supposed to argue. So what did James say that we're supposed to do? First, he told us to be quick to listen. In other words, when you find yourself in an argument, listen first. Do your best to hold off from speaking until you've actually made a true effort to listen to them. How often when you get in an argument, do you just kind of block things out and you're like, yeah, get past this point so I can talk about what I want to talk about? Instead, what would it look like if you really tried to hear what the other person was trying to say, what they were thinking? Don't you think that this piece of wisdom alone could help us in many of our disagreements? Most often, we don't slow down to listen to someone else, especially if we don't feel like they're slowing down to listen to us. James then tells us to be slow to speak. Now, for some of us, this one is really difficult. We want to speak our minds all the time, especially in an argument. The thought of not saying what we think or feel is a crazy idea. But remember, being slow to speak doesn't mean saying no to speaking. I think that's more where I land. Rather than being slow to speak, I just choose not to speak at all. And that's not what James is saying to do either. It says that we shouldn't be just sit back and to take it. James wasn't asking us not to defend ourselves or to have a point of view. Instead, he asks us to pause before we do, to stop before we talk, and to think before we speak. I don't know about you, but a lot of the things I've regretted in my arguments, a lot of the words I've said and regretted are because I didn't just think about them first. I didn't take a minute to pause and consider how these words might be received. If James were writing this letter today, I think he could have said this: be slow to text, slow to post, slow to comment, slow to talk behind someone's back. Whatever the response may be for you, pause and think about it before you actually say it. All of this really adds up to the final thing that James says here. Be slow to become angry. This is a total shift in how we look at our arguments, right? Our culture is all heated up, very angry, very passionate. And he wasn't asking us to ignore our feelings, but he was asking us to lead with another different feeling, stronger feeling in our arguments, which is love. Choosing to become slow to angry means choosing to love when we want to hate. This had me thinking about another verse found in 2 Corinthians 5:19. It says that God was reconciling the world to himself in Christ, not counting people's sins against them, and he has committed to us the message of reconciliation. That even when we were in the total wrong, we were sinning against God, God chose to love us through it anyway. And that gives us the power that we need to love others, even when we believe that they're in the wrong, or even when they're saying things that we really don't agree with. We can learn from our example that God and that Christ gives us by laying ourselves down for a brother or sister. It means focusing on the other person, not the point we're trying to make. It means valuing the relationship more than being right. In other words, when we argue, we need to remember this: care more about the person you're arguing with than the point you're trying to make. So, some things that you can do to really help yourself out with this as we head into this next week. Give these things a few shots. Next time you find yourself in an argument with someone that you care a lot about, maybe you're in one of those right now. I want you to think about, what would it look like if you tried to slow down and apply some of what James said here, to be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. Here's some other things that you can do this week as we head out. You can, one, commit these verses to memory. Maybe memorize James 1:19 and 2 Corinthians 5:19, and commit them to memory, and trust me that this is important. The next time you get in an argument, you're going to remember these things. Reconcile myself to people like God first reconciled himself to me. Be slow to speak, slow to anger. All these kinds of things will pop into your mind the next time you get in an argument. Don't underestimate the power of memorization. The next is to take these things and apply it in your life. Maybe, like I said, there's a person in your world right now who you're arguing with, and you could apply these very things. Who do you find yourself tempted to argue with? Someone in your family, a friend, a kid on your team? Put this person in your mind, think of them, and then apply these verses the next time you see them. Maybe write down these verses and think about that person so that next time you see them, you can better approach the conversation. And the third application, which I know is really tough, is put yourself in the other person's shoes. I want to challenge you to see the person more than just your differences, more than your argument, and more than your stance. Try to understand their side. This can be really tough, actually understanding where they're coming from, even if you don't agree with it. This is the part of being quick to listen. It's being quick to understand another person's point of view. Jesus could have won every argument that he ever had, but that's not the way that he rolled. He still talked to people. Jesus wasn't a walking debate machine. No, he pursued relationship. He made time to listen to people, made an effort to hear their perspectives. Putting yourself in someone else's shoes will help you do the same. It doesn't mean you're always going to agree with them, but I think you'll come to understand why they think the way that they do. It means that you'll be able to better relate with them. So, thanks for joining us. We're going to hop into small groups, and don't forget, your small group leaders are a little older than you. They've had more conflict in their life just by the fact that they've lived more time on this earth and had different people in their lives. They have they've fallen down in relationship and probably made some mistakes, and they've also rose above certain conflicts. They will be a great resource for you and tool for you as you have conversations about conflict. And you can also learn from each other too, how one another are dealing with these things. So I just pray that your group is a blessing for you, and that God really uses that. Have a great week.